My name is Mike Eisenegger. I'm the Executive Director of the Community Media Center of Lynn. And we'd asked the staff of MCE for a letter of support that provided the video documentation for MCE since the beginning, and it's covered a lot of public events. And it's been a great pleasure to follow this organization since the beginning and be able to provide that documentation. But the staff gave us a letter of support for our appeal to all the various city councils in Marin County for ongoing funding so that we can continue to provide these services. So I wanted to thank you. And I wanted to thank Councilman Butt, who is my councilman in Richmond. And I'm a proud Richmond resident and an MCE user, so thank you for that. So I just want to congratulate MCE on all their success so far, and I'm sure you'll succeed greatly in the future. Thank you.
More power to you.
Is there anybody else from the public wishing to address the board? Seeing none, I'm going to turn it over to Dawn.
Great. So I have just 4 items this evening. I wanted to first thank the board and members of the public who participated in our annual board retreat last week. It was really successful, and that's really thanks to all of you for being there. So thanks very much for doing that. We'll do it again next year. The next thing I wanted to just remind folks about, this is the last call for the CAISO tour coming up next week on Thursday, October 10th. Our appointment with CAISO is at 10:30. It's in Sacramento, and we even have some carpools put together. So if any of our board members are interested in coming along, let me or Darlene know, and we can get you into one of the carpools, which will be heavily used by staff, but board members are welcome as well. So just let us know if you're interested in visiting CAISO and seeing what they do there. Then the next item is I wanted to let folks know that we mailed out our annual Power Content Label mailers this week. This is what they look like. If you're an MCE customer, you'll be getting them in your mailboxes, and so will many of your constituents. Just wanted you to know what they look like. We have extra copies here. If anyone wants one to take today, if you haven't gotten yours yet, you can do that. And it's pretty exciting, really, because it shows what our content is for our light green power supply mix, how much renewable content is in there. It shows our deep green power mix, and then it compares it to the California standard power mix. And of course, we line up very favorably in the comparison. So let us know if you have any questions about that. And the last thing I wanted to report on is we just completed some internal data analysis, and I wanted to report out some really exciting news that our usage in deep green has increased. It's actually more than doubled in less than a year, from 1.52% to 2.95% of our overall load. And I think that's really significant, especially considering the volume of customers that we currently have. It really speaks to a lot of the hard efforts of our staff, our outreach folks, and our account managers. So I just wanted to share the good news that we're seeing a nice trajectory there, and we hope to keep that going. That's it for my report.
Great, thanks, Dawn. Anybody have any questions? Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry because I'm new to this. I'm just replacing Carla for tonight. But when it says unspecified on here, could unspecified be coal? I mean, could be anything?
Yeah, that's a great question, and fortunately the answer is right here on this chart. So the unspecified resources are resources that we buy from the California Standard Power Mix. So it's what's left over on the grid, above and beyond the direct purchases that we already make that you'll see shown there. So if you want to know what the unspecified content is, you can look at the column on the right, and you can see how it's broken down. So there is some coal in that. It's 8% coal.
Okay, so but it could be 40% coal because it all has to come.
Right.
Got it. Thank you.
Exactly. Yep.
Any other questions from the public? Okay, seeing none, does anyone want to move the consent calendar?
So, yes.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion carried. And now we're on to our energy efficiency update.
Great. I will, as is customary, take the podium. The floor is. So I tried to keep it short tonight because I know we have a short agenda, but there's so much going on in the energy efficiency world right now that it's still probably going to be the longest thing on our agenda tonight. But you all know I can get through it. So I'm just going to go through an update on each of the programs, multifamily, small commercial, single family, and then our financing programs, and then also just give you a quick contract update, which is more of a heads up for what's coming down the road. For the multifamily program, there's not a lot of significant new stuff that's happening along. We're just trudging along with the program. We did have 2 new applicants since the last meeting for which we've been able to secure rebate reservation forms, so that's good news. We've also been working with existing program participants to gain access to the data about how the program has improved their properties and reduced their energy savings so that we can develop case studies for the success of the program and distribute those and really use it as a chance to highlight the benefits of participating in the program. One person who had replaced their boiler in their multifamily property has reported 75% reduction in the energy use, which is significantly more than we estimated. So that's great news, and we're looking forward to publicizing that. Additionally, just last week, I was able to attend a meet and greet with Housing and Urban Development program officers who had provided the funding for the MHA project that we worked on throughout April and June of this year. It was a great opportunity to have sort of a success story and relay that to the funding officers at the federal level. It was a really good opportunity for everyone to get in the same room and feel really good about the work that we've done, and it went very well, so we were happy about that. And finally, we are doing a deep dive with all of our programs, which you'll hear a little bit about as we move forward, but for the multifamily program, we're doing a bit of a deep dive next week to consider where we've been succeeding and where we haven't been doing very well, and how we can really improve. And one of the things that we're contemplating is a potential incentive redesign. This is partially triggered from the fact that we're not isolated in this area. There are a few other multifamily programs that are operating in the regional energy network, which includes the 9 counties surrounding the Bay Area, and also the Pacific Gas and Electric multifamily program. And we've had a couple questions come in from program participants about, you know, gosh, it seems like participating in that program is a really good deal. Why can't I do something like that? So we're going to take a look at our numbers and see if there's a way that we not necessarily can provide a greater incentive, but package it in a way that's simpler and easier to understand. So we're kind of learning from our colleagues on that one. So I'll be reporting back on that in November to let you know some of the strategies that we've come up with. Initial program results, we have spent $104,000, achieved 44,500 kilowatt hours, just about 7.6 kilowatts peak reduction, and about 3,000 firms, excuse me. So far, our numbers are not as high as we would like to see, but they're not distressingly low either. And we've been seeing a significant increase in reported savings as we've been moving forward from about June to August. So we are, as I mentioned, at the board retreat in the ramp-up phase right now, but we would like to see more savings. So that's part of the deep dive that we have next week. And then we have our performance metrics there. Moving on to small commercial, sorry, there's a lot of text up there. This program, we did have an opportunity to have our in-person sort of deep dive interim program check-in this week, and it gave us a really good opportunity to check in on how the program is going, what some of the challenges are coming from, and how we might be able to address them moving forward. The real big story in the small commercial program is that there have been significant changes in the way that they've been able to claim savings relative to how they did in the past. And it's both a success, it's really a success story, because it's related to the fact that we passed such good codes and standards in the state of California that the baseline case that you can use to compare against when you're claiming energy savings has increased dramatically. What I mean by that, for example, is that you used to be able to say that for every CFL you were installing, you were replacing an incandescent. Those are like your deemed savings that you get to claim to the Public Utilities Commission. But this year, the change went into effect where now you're claiming against a CFL, base case scenario. So the amount, the margin of savings that you're getting is significantly less. Similarly, there have been, I don't even need to go into this, T12 to T8 switch offs, things like that, that have resulted in sometimes up to a 70% reduction in the amount of savings that you can claim per measure. We've looked across the state to see how some of our other colleagues are doing and finding that the savings that we've achieved are actually very consistent, as distressing as they are. We're at about 5% of our program targets, and that's consistent with a lot of the programs across the state that are similar. So we're thinking about this, we have lower incentives that we can offer and less savings for those incentives, and it's creating a bit of a value proposition issue from the way that they've pitched the program in the past. Because of that, we're working on a few different things. It's clear that we can't rely on the knocking on door-to-door approach the way we have in the past, because the sticker price doesn't seem as good as it was historically. So now we really need to target our outreach a lot more and find customers who are interested and motivated to do something, as opposed to just relying on the attractiveness of the program to get them on board. Along those lines, we're trying a new approach of reaching out to property management folks, doing Chamber of Commerce presentations. We've also been able to really utilize the work of some of the public affairs team in Richmond already to leverage relationships that they were able to establish and use those as opportunities to get in front of business organizations and present our program as well. And a big part of this is also considering a redesign of our incentive structure in the small commercial program. I think it's become clear to us that if the incentives we're offering, we can't necessarily motivate the action we want to see. So we're thinking about increasing our base incentives a little bit, offering kickers. While the CFLs aren't providing the same kind of savings that they have in the past, there's some really transformative things happening in the LED lighting market, which really is an ability to capture a whole new level of savings. And a pretty significant portion of the small commercial energy use does come from lighting. So we think that that'll be an area where we can focus, maybe even offer an additional incentive to motivate action. On top of that, one other thing that we're thinking about is doing a kicker if someone does multiple measures to try and drive participation in our whole building. So if you sign on to do not just lighting and or refrigeration, but lighting, refrigeration, and HVAC, or lighting, refrigeration, and building envelope, then maybe we can provide an additional incentive on top of the base package that helps provide an additional motivation and financial incentive for doing that. Another possibility is working with property management associations and providing a kicker incentive if they can get 3 or 4 of their properties in their management to sign on and complete projects. So these are some of the ideas we're thinking about. We're very open to other ideas, and again, this is something I'll be reporting back on in November. We have a bit of analysis to do in terms of the cost effectiveness of our programs and what we can do while staying within our targets. So for initial program results, we spent about $127,000 in this program, achieved 63,000 kilowatt hours, 9 peak reduction. We actually have a negative therm savings in this program because when you replace incandescent bulbs with CFL bulbs, because they're more efficient, you're actually losing heat that would have been produced by the incandescent bulbs, and so you have to report that as a negative therm savings on the presumption that people are going to use more heat. So that's kind of an interesting quirk about the program. And another reason why we need to get more whole building projects in to target those HVAC systems and building envelope. So far we have 19 invoice projects. However, 801 have been touched, meaning that they really canvassed over 1,000 buildings, but of those about 200 had addresses that weren't right or the business was closed. So from that, we have about 800 that we've actually gone in the door and approached per person. And from that, we've been able to provide 190 audits and 40 whole building packages, 40 whole building audits. So part of what we're doing now is taking a deeper dive into those numbers and trying to figure out from those 189 audits that we provided, how many projects are getting completed, how many are not getting completed, and what can we do to improve that. And one of the things that we actually thought would work really well is if we do an incentive redesign, we're planning on mailing something out to the folks who we provided audits to and saying, hey, new incentive levels, now we also have financing. There's a number of things that make it more attractive now. Why don't you consider coming back in and doing a project at this point? So we're hoping that that will also produce some really successful uptake. The single family program is, there's a lot going on in that program right now. There's 2 main things that I want to report on. One is the home utility reports. If you recall, these are the reports that we'll be sending out to customers to show them how their precise energy is used in their home, meaning their actual energy use figures, and how that compares to a comparable neighbor. So if you are a 2-person household in a 12,000 square foot home, we'll show you how you do compared to another 12,000 square foot home with 2 people living there. And these are the way that we got this information. We have access to all the gas and electrical usage information for all the customers in our service territory. Those accounts were screened to find the highest users. Those users really have the most opportunity to save, both in energy savings and financially. And then that data was cross-referenced with Axiom data, which provides things like socioeconomic information, census tract data, real estate data, so we know like the age of your house, different things like that. And because we get all of this data compiled together, we're really able to target who we think will be the most likely early actors and can hopefully demonstrate a significant change in their energy savings. And because these are real customers using their real usage information, we're able to track those specific customers on a monthly basis and monitor whether or not getting that mailer is making an impact on their energy use. Historically, these programs have been shown to reduce energy by just 2% across the customer base just by showing people how they're doing. We actually are hoping that we can get even higher amounts because we're targeting these high energy users. And they have been shown in the past to create more savings when you're targeting the high energy users. So our mailing data set for October 7th, we'll be initially targeting about 4,800 households. We have some concerns about how this approach will be received in Marin. I know that Marin tends to be a very privacy-centric county, so maybe people will be super excited about getting an envelope that shows them how their energy use is. So we're going to be following up with some customer surveys, some customer reports, finding out how people receive them. And then if it was successful and if we are seeing energy reductions, we hope to expand the program in spring. So I just wanted to show you an example of what these mailers are going to look like. There's a front and a back page, which I'll go through briefly. Oops, not reading it. I do that like every meeting. So this is a graph that shows you how your energy use is doing, comparative neighbor, and then an energy efficient home. And then down below, it shows you also how you're doing on, it looks like an annual percentage, or an annual picture. And then on the back side, we have some initial suggestions that the homeowner can consider. Here's some ways that you can save, and here's the money that you can save if you actually take these measures into effect. But what we're really trying to do as a result of these mailers is drive people to this link right here, where they can actually log in. There will be a pre-established dashboard for each customer that draws information based on their usage, and that'll give them an opportunity to adjust the assumptions that we used in creating the mailers and choose the actions that they're ready to take, or take actions off the list if they've already done them or if they don't want to take them. So it allows customers to have an ongoing personable relationship with their utility use. So it's something we're really excited about. Another thing that is happening in the single family program is the schools program. We had a pilot of this program in the spring of last year and learned a lot of things that we could do to make it work better, and have been working really hard to enact those changes. I'm really excited to see what happens in the schools program in spring or in the fall of this year. We've made some significant changes to the web portal to make it easier for homeowners to identify the school groups and get engaged. We've also added things that make it more communicable and fun for children. For example, it tracks your savings and points, which we have worked with the team at PEI to make sure that those points are representative of energy savings. But for kids, what we've done is we've actually compared those points to trees. So we've been able to tell kids, you know, if you do this measure, you'll be able to save this many trees. We're also working on things like including measures that are more amenable to children, things that kids can do without the help of their parents, like turn off lights when you're leaving the room, turn off the water when you're brushing your teeth, things like that. So we think it'll actually get a lot more uptake with the students, and it'll be more useful and exciting for them. In addition, we did a curriculum revamp. We worked with Strategic Energy Innovations, who does a lot of work here in Marin on that. They had a great program already, but we worked with them to make sure that it had a greater emphasis on the web tool, driving people there so that they could really use it as an engagement tool, and also recalculating incentives so that top performing classes get prizes, but we wanted to make sure that the threshold was at the right level. It was pretty low in spring. We found out a lot of people were getting incentives for just pledging to do stuff and not actually following through and doing stuff, so we kind of reconfigured the way that works. Classes started on Tuesday for 3 schools, Rancho Novato, Hidden Valley in San Anselmo, and Manor in Fairfax. And then there are 2 more schools in the queue, one of which we are working on signing up teachers for, and then we're trying to identify a private school based on some of the input that we got from the board and from the executive officer. So we're really excited about that as well. Currently, there's a total of 993 students being reached. That's out of the 3 schools above, and there are more to come when we finish with the other 2 schools. So we really hope this will be an avenue for driving participation in the web tool as well. I wanted to show you a brief snapshot of the redesign that we've done on the tool. This is really an example of how we've tried to make it much easier for the participants to understand the steps involved in the program. We're also working on emphasizing the energy saving kit that we have for them. So If anyone chooses to receive a kit, we'll give them a little kit that has light bulbs, faucet aerators, shower head replacements, and information on how they can save more energy. So we're also hoping that that can create energy savings in the program as well. Initial program results, we have spent pretty consistent with the other programs, about $160,000 here. The savings to this program are tied to the home utility reports based on the white paper we submitted to the Energy Commission. So those will start being reported hopefully in November once we've had one first round going out. It actually might take until December before we're able to actually track and monitor those results. We have been able to get some performance metrics, about 62 homes touched through outreach, 353 action plans that have been developed on the portal so far, and 67 households participating in the co-op editions. Again, that's the schools program where we try and get classrooms to co-optively get as many savings as possible. An update on the financing program. The single-family financing program, we've been working at breakneck speed since this board approved the operating agreement in September. The emphasis has been on getting our marketing and outreach plan in line, getting our website ready, getting the different loan agreement documents, frequently asked question documents, scripts for our call center representatives, basically getting all of those pieces in place before we push out a press release and really highlight the program. So we're really excited. We're going to be launching a press release likely next week. We're just waiting on getting the website, the final piece up and running. We really want to make sure we do that right, and it's been a bit more time than we estimated going back and forth with the bank on different compliance issues. So it's really important that we do take that time, but I'm really looking forward to seeing it. It's coming along really nicely. There are a few other things to mention in the financing realm. One thing is that, as some of you may have heard last week at the board retreat, there was a decision approved at the California Public Utilities Commission to enable the statewide financing programs. As this board may remember, when we originally applied to the California Public Utilities Commission, we were the only entity in the state that was given the authority to move forward with financing programs, and worked very hard to do that. The rest of the financing programs were taken out of the decision and put on a separate track, and that track just finalized last Thursday. With that, there will be a suite of financing programs that will be offered statewide that were approved for the utilities. It is unclear what the time frame for the implementation of those pilots are. Some of those are being put on what's called a fast track process. My estimation is that we'll see some of those fast track programs coming online probably early 2013, quarter one or quarter two of 2013. And then there are a suite of statewide programs which are not on the fast track. Some of those may be later 2013, possibly even as late as 2014, possibly even as late as 2015. There are some potential questions related to how much of the language of the financing decision applies to us. For example, they released policies on how the statewide financing pilots ought to take place. And it's not that we aren't in line with those, but it's a question about whether or not we have to be. And then similarly, there are potential opportunities in that decision. For example, because they took so long to approve the statewide financing pilots, those programs have been authorized through 2015, as opposed to the rest of the efficiency, which is 2013-2014. So we will need to seek clarification from Energy Division to find out which of those apply to us and which don't. So that will be something that staff undertakes as we move forward here. Another thing worth mentioning is that we have heard loud and clear from this board and from members of the public that they'd be very interested in having a financing option for distributed generation. So we've been working with our bank partners to see if there was something we could work out to get that offered to our customers. There isn't any prohibition for us using the on-bill mechanism to finance distributed generation. So that actually is an opportunity that would be available to us. The challenge is that the credit enhancement dollars that we bring to the table to get the interest rate lower can only secure loans for energy efficiency measures. So that can't fund the renewable energy loans. So that's the conversation we're having with the bank. Is there a way to negotiate a blended interest rate for certain projects and still capture some of the benefits of the subsidized financing and be able to offer customers a good deal and be able to pay it on the bill? So I will be happy to report back on that in November as well. The standard offer program is something we haven't heard about for a while. We were moving along pretty well in the standard offer program with a couple community meetings to talk about how we might be able to move forward. And around August, we were actually approached by someone from the Public Utilities Commission who wanted to make us aware of an opportunity to participate in the demand response pilot. It's called the IRM2 pilot. I wish I knew what that acronym was. I'm sorry, I don't. Basically, what the pilot does is it would allow MEA through a really streamlined mechanism to be able to bid into the CAISO market. And that is actually dovetailing very nicely with the original standard offer program concept, where you take energy efficiency reductions and bid them into the resource adequacy market to prove that you're making these reductions. They're real reductions. You should be getting paid for them from the CAISO wholesale market as well. So there's an opportunity to evaluate the synergy between these two programs. There may be ways to bring standard offer program dollars to the table to help invest in energy efficiency measures, which make those demand response measures easier to capture. I'm particularly interested in some of the things that have been discussed recently, like at the board meeting. I'm very curious if there's a way to work with Tesla. That's something that we're thinking about for commercial customers. So we'll continue investigating that and reaching out to continue those conversations. The target for that pilot, I should say that we really are at the very initial stages of understanding the pilot, what its implications are, and really confirming our participation in it. We got documents this week that start to outline some of that material. So we'll be working to wade our way through that, get our hands on it, and specify an implementation plan. January is the target that we had initially set on for customer identification and enrollment in the program. So I expect that in November and December we'll be getting more details about how this program would work. And finally, the last item, I just wanted to highlight to this board that when we brought contracts forward for the efficiency program, we approved them just for the year 2013. And of course, our funding is for 2013-2014. So that means we have a whole new round of contracts coming up for board approval. My objective is to bring those before this board in the November board meeting, where possible. We'll be addressing changes in the program design based on some of the deep dive meetings that we've been having. So you can expect to see some changes in the incentive structures, some budget reallocations to respond to that, including potentially more dollars for the marketing and outreach programs. And we may be looking for new partners in certain cases as well. So all of these changes, we're planning on at least an initial briefing at the executive committee meeting in October, and hopefully we can get our game together, and hopefully I can get my game together to bring those contracts before the board in November of this year. And with that, I'm available for any questions.
Questions for Becky?
Looks like Tom.
Yes,
You know, I find it really difficult to try to visualize how these programs work. And I think it would be really helpful when you start to get some of them online or completed, if you could give us some case studies so you could show how a particular program is applied to a particular property owner or occupant, and kind of walk through you know, how it worked out and what kind of changes were made and how they were paid for and what the energy savings was and what the cost was and that kind of thing. I don't know how, are there any, in any of the programs that you've reviewed, do any of them have completed projects yet?
Yes. Mm-hmm. We have 19 invoice projects for the small commercial program that I could select a case
And they're
study
done?
from.
They're
They're
finished?
done. Yeah, invoice
Yeah.
means that we have issued a rebate check for them.
Well, you don't want to load them up all on one agenda, but I'm thinking that it might be a good idea in future meetings to just to take one or two of them and let's do some case studies.
That's an excellent suggestion. I should have mentioned in the multifamily program that we're actually, due to the great experience that one of the participants had, we're actually working on a process to authorize using their utility bills, analyzing them, and collecting all that information to do exactly that, present a case study. So at least the multifamily program, I anticipate that we'll be ready to do that by November, and I can certainly investigate the ability to do that for the small commercial program.
Other questions? Larry?
On the demand response program that you were talking about, is that time of use billing?
Not quite. So the concept behind the demand response program, and I'm going to be over my head and looking for Greg to help me out on this one because it's really resource procurement. But the CAISO market has a wholesale energy efficiency market, which is basically available to people when there are shortages in energy supply relative to what they projected. And so there's an opportunity for energy providers to buy power or to bid in power to that wholesale market to basically make up the differences. It's related to peak energy use in the fact that when a lot of people are using energy, that's what really creates that margin where we need to see that activity. But the concept behind this pilot is that currently the way demand response programs work is that the utilities manage them, the utilities pay for them, but they actually don't interact with the CAISO wholesale market where you're seeing those need for the quick purchases and sale of energy. So the idea was, well, that seems like something where we should be able to close that loop. This is an initial test case where we can actually take demand response, like we bid it a day ahead. Say, if you end up needing these reductions tomorrow, we'll turn our generators off at that time. And instead of getting a payment from the utility, you're actually getting a payment from the wholesale market. So one of those resource mix that you can use to make up that margin at the peak time when you either need to buy or sell power can be actually not using the energy instead of buying the energy from a different source.
So it's more as a program for the agency as a whole rather than individual ratepayers, correct?
Right, and it can be used by individual ratepayers. They're actually, you can choose to aggregate or to disaggregate the participation in the program at whatever granularity you as a participant choose. So for example, if we had an incredibly sophisticated electronic system and could just shut generators off at the touch of a button, we may have multiple participants and we bid in the demand reductions for all of them. Or we may choose to work with one or two customers specifically, and then it would be sort of a disaggregated model where we contact them and they bid in that reduction on their own.
So those customers, it would be on an opt-in basis?
Exactly. We would be pursuing opportunities with customers that we know either have an opportunity for demand response or are already participating in demand response programs to try and get them on board.
Yeah, on a voluntary basis?
On a voluntary basis, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Further questions? Quick one, Becky. So as you mentioned, we're funded through 2013 and 2014.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of applying for future funding, presumably through the CPUC, when would we need to start doing that? And then similarly, when would we, in effect, get graded on how we've done in terms of being able to seek future funding?
Okay, so I'm going to cut those into two different questions, the future and then how we get graded, because they're unfortunately not as related as they should be. So the answer for the future question is that we're actually beginning that planning process now. Something that Beth will touch on is that just this week, the CPUC released its long-anticipated proposed decision on how CCAs should administer energy efficiency programs and what the rules around that should be. There are some really good things in there. There are some not so good things on there. I'm not gonna spoil it. I'll save all the good stuff for that subject. But in the context of that, one of the things that it did clarify that I will tell you is that NEA, as an operating CCA with an operating efficiency program, would be expected to apply to administer funds at the same time as the utilities. At least if we wanted to administer funds under subsection A through E, A through D of the public utilities code 381.1. So what that means is that all of the utilities and us are now waiting for the guidance decision that would come from the California Public Utilities Commission, which specifies the amount of funding available, the targets they would like to achieve, and requests applications from the utilities. That guidance document will have suggestions for broad program design concepts, things they would like to see, things they don't want to see, and that gives all of us an opportunity to basically apply back to them and say, this is how we propose using these funds. As I mentioned at the board retreat, we are anticipating some very significant changes in the portfolio. Usually it's been a 2 to 3 year rotational cycle. All the signs indicate that this time they're moving to a 5 to 10 year portfolio cycle. There's a lot of implications of that change. Some programs will be more static, and then there will have to be another process for determining pilot programs, innovative program offerings. So that guidance decision will be the main trigger that initiates the process. But in the meantime, we're definitely working to see how our programs are doing, how we're liking the relationships we have, if there's anything we want to try differently. And we're actually also coordinating with the county to have those discussions as well and figure out on a more regional basis what that opportunity means for us as a region. So those discussions are kind of
great,
but not in a extremely formal process yet. And in terms of how we're graded, the way that things work at the California Public Utilities Commission is that you basically propose to them a bunch of ex-ante savings. That means like before you do the project, you say, we're gonna go out and try and do these types of projects. we're using something called deemed savings from the database for energy efficiency resources to estimate what the impact of those programs is going to be. And then we're going to use this much money to get those savings in those projects. And the Public Utilities Commission looks at that package. They say, okay, here are the savings you say you're going to get, here's the money you're going to use for it, and they use that to calculate something they call a total resource cost. And that's how they evaluate the cost effectiveness of the portfolio. And if you're over 1 or 1.25 for the utilities, then you get a pass and you're approved to go forward with the programs. They may make specific modifications for program design. There isn't a point at which they actually ask you to prove that you've achieved that TRC necessarily. What happens past that is that you report to the utilities on a quarterly, on a monthly, and on an annual basis, and not to the utilities, excuse me, to the California Public Utilities Commission, and you tell them this is how we're doing so far, this is what we've achieved, et cetera. And that doesn't, as far as I've seen it, feed back into the application process of the next year, because usually there's a pretty significant lag in the reported savings in the application cycle. What it does do is it can influence changes in the assumptions that are used to build the portfolios in the first place. There are certain cases where they might look specifically at a program or specifically at a measure and disallow it in subsequent portfolios, or they may look at the way an IOU has done in delivering a specific program and slap their hand and ask them to make improvements or ask them to not fund that program in the future. So it happens from time to time, but it's not as integrated as it should be.
Okay, members of the public on this item. All right, well, thank you for a very thorough report. Okay, so item 6, my understanding is we're going to kick over to November. Okay, great. Item 7, resolution approving Amendment 7, which we initially took up at the retreat. So.
That's right. So just a couple of things on item 7, just to get us started here. So there was an adjustment in the staff report and the resolution that went out in the supplemental report earlier this week. So if you all don't have that already, if you didn't download that when that came across, let me know. We have extra copies here. And it's really a subtle adjustment that I'll go over here. And then what's going to happen next is we'll have some more discussions at our executive committee about the topic that relates to any changes to our JPA agreement. So that's just sort of to orient you. So last week at our board retreat, we spent a lot of time talking about how we might want to move forward with considering service in new communities. And there was a lot of discussion about our mission statement and how service in new communities could help us to achieve our goals and our mission of reducing climate change and getting more renewables onto the grid and getting more energy efficiency programs out in communities. And as a result of that discussion, the board voted to approve policy 007 as Director Rufine likes to call it. He was Director Rufine. So that policy is now in place and in effect and has been attached just for reference in this board item. And the other thing that was approved was the affiliate member process document. And just as a reminder, or for those of you that may not have been at that meeting, the policy 007 indicates or delineates 2 different types of memberships that could be considered. So there's the affiliate membership process, which is for a community that would have 40,000 customers or fewer. So about the size of Richmond or fewer, because that's something that we've done before. It would also be for a community that is within 30 miles of our existing jurisdiction. And so those were the 2 factors that would allow for a community to pursue the affiliate membership process, which was approved by the board. And then there was a second category called the special consideration membership. And the special consideration membership would be for a community that is that would have more than 40,000 customers, or for a community that is farther than 30 miles away from our jurisdiction. We have not yet developed a process for special consideration membership. That's something that will need to be taken up in the future, and will be coming in right away anytime soon, but it will ultimately be coming to our technical committee and our executive committee for discussion before we get into determining policy for that. So there is a a next step that will need to be determined with relationship to the affiliate membership process, and that is when we bring in a new community under the affiliate membership process, would it make sense for them to have a seat on the board, have voting rights, just as we offer now to our regular members, or not? Or is there some other approach that we should take? We had discussions around that last week, but because there wasn't an opportunity to flesh that out in a whole lot of detail, we thought it would make the most sense to bring that back at the committee level and allow for some more discussion before we decide what kind of role we would want an affiliate member to play on the board, and if we would want it to be different than our existing parties. So what we heard at the retreat were some really good suggestions. One of the ideas that we came to the retreat with was, oh, well, maybe for affiliate members, they would be able to have the service offered in their community, but they wouldn't have a seat on the board. And that would be a way to ensure that we could expand to multiple communities without having logistical issues and impacts on the size of the board. On the other hand, I think some good points were raised about making sure there's fair representation and making sure that we don't have communities that don't have any type of representation directly on the board. And so there were some suggestions made for that, and kind of the importance of having a local connection in our program. And then there was some kind of middle ground ideas that were thrown out. So I'll just give a quick preview, but it's that decision is not something that we'll be voting on this evening. What we'll be voting on this evening is simply a resolution that codifies the affiliate membership process that was already voted on last week. So it's more of a formality. But just to give you a preview, I think that if we were to make an adjustment in our JPA agreement that would dictate how new affiliate members would have representation on the board, it would mean a change in section 3.3. We'll talk about this at the committee level, but there would be a change to define what an affiliate party is, and either say that they wouldn't have any representation on the board. The second option would be that they have full voting rights and representation on the board, just as our other parties do now. And the final option is kind of a hybrid approach where there's one representative per county. And that would mean that we are maintaining a reasonable size of the board, most likely, but that we are also allowing for representation, and that one representative per county could rotate on an annual basis if we end up with more than one jurisdiction per county. And the voting share that we currently allocate to any representative on the board for that county representative would be tied to the actual number of participants in the entire county. So that might allow for some proportional representation that ties to the community and ensures that there's some fairness with regard to how the voting is handled. So those are some of the ideas. We're still, I think, going to be having some more discussion about this, so we're open to other ideas that might come into play. But in my discussions with folks and board members, it seems like those are a good place to start. We've also been engaged with Greg Stepanisich, who is our municipal council and has assisted us with actually preparing the JPA agreement, so he's very familiar with it, and he helped craft it from the beginning, and works with a lot of different JPAs and governing bodies. So he's a good resource, and we'll be sure to include him in our committee discussion so that we can cover a lot of ground there. And then it's likely that we'll be bringing something back to the board in our November meeting for a vote for any JPA adjustments that need to be made. So that's it. I'm happy to answer any questions, and then we'll just need to take action on the resolution.
Great questions. Yeah, I think that approach makes sense. So, and if there are additional ideas that come forward, we'll consider those as well. The right balance between fairness, operational integrity, etc. So, but in the meantime, we have the revised MCE affiliate membership process. Thanks again to everyone's input at the retreat. I think the document accurately reflects the changes we recommended. So without further ado, or any comment from the public or anyone, I'll entertain a motion for approval on that.
So moved.
Second?
Good.
Director
Actually,
Bragman, yeah.
I actually had a comment about
Sure.
it. And I support it, and I think it's a good idea to move forward on it. But the one thing I was wondering about is we also came up with affiliate membership criteria at the retreat. And I thought, that maybe it would be a good idea to actually incorporate those into the resolution, because when you go through the criteria, it really requires that we look at expanding with certain goals in mind to balance growth versus what we're trying to accomplish for existing members. And they're great goals. They're great goals, and I just think they should be explicitly called out in the resolution, or at least incorporated by reference like some of the other items are. So that would be a friendly amendment to go forward on it, but I really think it provides a really strong framework for us, and will provide a strong framework for us as we go forward with this. So.
Agreed, and that does sound like a good suggestion as well, and easily resolvable. Okay, so an amended motion.
Okay, thank you.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That matter carries. So Don, you'll revise the resolution. Okay. Item 8, a bit early this evening. The regulatory
My slides are short this week, so anyway, it is actually a very short update. Okay. So we're going to talk about 3 items today. The PG&E green option and the recently passed Senate Bill 43. We're going to talk about energy efficiency, which Becky touched on. And then we're going to talk about residential rate design. There's an ongoing process at the CPUC that's currently being informed by what's happening in the legislature. So this is a little bit of a walk down memory lane, but since it's a bit complicated, I wanted to put it out in a timeline for folks. So there has been sort of a CPUC, a couple of tracks at the CPUC, and also a couple of tracks on the legislative level on investor-owned utilities' ability to provide special renewable tariffs. So the way that this started out is with SDG&E providing an application to do the sun rate and share the sun. Sun rate would be sort of a portfolio approach of RPS eligible products. Share the Sun is kind of like SMUD solar share programs where you can specifically choose a project to be a part of. Subsequently, PG&E submitted an application for a REC-based product. And right after that, there were a couple of bills that came into the legislature, SB 43 and AB 1014, which ended up merging a little bit later on. In the PG&E application at the commission, I'm very sorry that this is convoluted, but the context is helpful in the end. So PG&E, the California Coalition of Utility Employees, so that's the union, Sierra Club, and others, filed a settlement agreement which substantially revised what PG&E was proposing. So instead of having a REC-based product, they would have something more similar to the sun rate, where you would have RPS eligible contracts in a portfolio that you would be able to participate in. So after PG&E filed their settlement agreement,
I'm sorry to interrupt. Would you mind just telling me what the green option is?
Yes.
What is the bigger picture?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Okay, so the big picture is the green option is similar to the deep green product.
Okay, this is PG&E's competitive.
Right,
I got
exactly.
it. Thank
And
you.
so to date,
the investor-owned utilities have never been able to offer a differentiated product.
Got it.
So, you know, the idea was that this was supposed to be taken care of through the competitive markets. And after the energy crisis in 2000 and 2001, they basically shut down the competitive market in California. At the same time, in 2002, with AB 117, they allowed for CCA. And so these are the different options that are out there. There's a gradual reopening of direct access so that commercial customers could receive differentiated products. But it hasn't been available to residential customers. And so there's been a lot of interest on the part of the utilities to be able to offer a greener product, but it actually runs into a lot of different issues, including competitive issues, ratepayer indifference issues, you know, cost shifting issues, a lot of the things that we see as recurring themes. So this green option would be an elective product, so kind of like how folks can opt out to deep green with us. They could also choose the sun rate if you're in the San Diego's territory, or the share of the sun, or the green option. None of these have been approved yet, so that's the process that we're going through. The legislation is important because it authorizes the utilities to do this. There would be a really significant question if they would be allowed to do this without specific legislation. But at the commission, generally, what the commission likes to do is take a comprehensive look instead of these piecemeal approaches to these different green opportunities. But that wasn't the process that the utilities were following. They sort of filed their applications as they wanted to. So in May of this year, we filed a motion for consolidation at the Public Utilities Commission. So it was two different proceedings in parallel tracks, and we asked them to be merged. So that actually, motions for consolidation are very rarely granted, but ours was granted. And actually the pieces of legislation, SB 43 and AB 1014, merged into one bill. So concurrent to our involvement at the Public Utilities Commission, which I'll talk about in just a minute, we were also very involved in SB 43 and AB 1014. We were talking with the sponsors of the bills and with the legislators to ensure that there wouldn't be any cost shifting to non-participating ratepayers, to mitigate any of the impacts on our own customers, and make sure that, you know, for example, any green product that we would provide would be able to be cost competitive with one that the utilities provide. So this really does run into a much more significant issue, because as AB 1014 and SB 43 converged, this was at the same point in time where the SFPUC failed to adopt rates for the Clean Power SF CCA program. So that basically stopped Clean Power SF for the moment. And hopefully not permanently, I don't think so. But what two of the SFPUC commissioners cited was SB 43. Why would we undertake CCA if our customers can just elect a green option? And obviously that is a totally different scenario, because when you have a CCA, you enroll everybody, and you can make such a significant difference by being a green CCA than having individuals elect to go green. And although it's great to have folks have that option, that's the sort of competitive challenge. Is this going to have a chilling effect on CCA? So in September, the legislature adopted SB 43, and it was just recently signed. There was a recent important pre-hearing conference in the consolidated proceeding. That was the first time we'd sort of gotten together, all of the parties in both of the proceedings, to discuss what the plan forward was going to be. And the administrative law judge, it looks like he's going to be taking a very proactive approach and may require the utilities to actually not start from scratch, but to file a proposal jointly and file testimony jointly, so that there's consistent programs across all avenues. And that will be useful for us and for other interveners to make sure that all of these sort of general proposals are fair, rather than sort of divide and conquer kind of approach that you sometimes get when you are trying to deal with 3 very large, significant proceedings on similar but very different matters. So, sorry for the sort of long timeline, but it does sort of frame what we're looking at going forward. So, what we've been looking at. Sorry, I'll just make this quick. So both on the legislative front and also on the regulatory front, our 2 main concerns are, one is that we make sure that any green opportunity that the commission is going to allow doesn't create a chilling effect. It doesn't supplant other green opportunities. There should be as many green opportunities for folks as possible. That includes CCA. It's not exclusive to CCA. And then also, we just want to make sure that cost allocation competitive issues are addressed. Mr. Green.
Beth, with PG&E's proposal, their green option, based on your timeline, is the substance of that option renewable energy certificates? That's how they're approaching it? It's not actually renewably produced energy?
As I was sort of mentioning, when PG&E and Turn and Q entered into the settlement, they substantially revised what the proposal was. So now it's basically what we call a bucket 1 product, which means it's in the renewable portfolio standard, that is the in-state renewables. So the contracts that have come before you, Calpine and this various solar contracts, those are all sort of in-state bucket 1 contracts. So they would be using bucket 1 contracts for their green option. There are a couple of nuances, which include the fact that they want to use resources that already exist in their portfolio to serve this separate set of customers and charge those customers more, which I'm not terribly fond of. But there are, and there's a lot of, we're very concerned about the cost shifting issues that are raised by the settlement agreement. So we are glad that the commission is taking this seriously and is going to require this joint proposal, and the joint proposal is also required to indicate how it complies with each provision of the law that was passed of SB 43.
Do you want to spend another minute on cost shifting, just so the board understands? I do think that's the key issue.
So cost allocation is definitely a key issue for us. And in essence, so for a portfolio of products that are being served to bundled customers, what we need to make sure is that the customers who are on the green option are paying the actual cost of that it's not being subsidized by other ratepayers. If it's subsidized by other ratepayers, it's an artificially low rate for a green product, which means that has a really detrimental effect on other folks who would offer green opportunities, so it's not a real price. So what we saw in the settlement agreement, which we hope that there's going to be some revisions there based on this joint proposal approach. Certain costs were not included in the sort of premium that would be paid by green option customers. So as a result, you have sort of a subsidy from a broad range of customers. Yeah.
What's the basis for that cost? Because often green energy is supplied at very amounts of cost. We've seen that when we've reviewed proposals. So what's the baseline that's used for that?
That's a great question. And if you would like to answer it, you're welcome to come to the commission with me. But joking aside, I think that those are the really serious issues that we have to look at. How do you decide, what project are you going to decide is going to be the ones that are part of this project? Are you just going to cherry pick inexpensive projects and sort of leave the more expensive ones to other ratepayers? Are you going to use sort of a blended approach based on what timeline? I think that these are all really serious questions, and this really drives at the heart of the challenge of letting basically a monopoly run the only sort of opportunity. Where's the check and balance? Where's sort of the cost comparison? And I think that is where MEA provides a really important value to the commission. There's sort of a sanity check of, do these types of products make sense? And obviously we have the deep green product, which is one option for our customers, and there's been discussion previously of doing a solar shares, which is investment in a very specific renewable product. And but those types of costs is a very challenging question, and I don't have an answer, and I don't know how it's going to pan out, but hopefully we get more clarity on that as this proceeding progresses. And there's a pretty short timeline on the proceeding too. It's going to end by July of next year, which doesn't sound like a short timeline, but for those of us involved in the commission, it's lightning fast. So are there any more questions on green option?
And if I could add just one more point of clarification, I think when we talk about cost shifting, a really nice concrete example is that what was proposed in the settlement is that some of the things that we pay for when we're buying generation, like CAISO charges, resource adequacy, some of those things were subtracted out of the green option cost. So what that means is that when a customer sees the price of PG&E's green option, it's gonna be artificially low, because PG&E is still paying for those things, but they're spreading that around to all the customers, even our customers.
So that's the anti-competitive nature of that proposition. And so part of what you're talking about, Beth, is what you guys are doing includes flushing this stuff out, isolating it, putting it in front of the commission and saying, hey, this not only is not fair, but it's harmful to the CCA objectives as manifested in the statute and everything that we've been doing.
Right, exactly. And actually, sort of getting back to what's in the statute, we were actually quite successful in our involvement with SB 43 and also in 1014. We worked closely, as I mentioned, with the various offices, and one of the important victories that we had there was the statute is replete with no cost shifting language. So these programs are not allowed to cost shift. And it's very clear and it's repeated throughout the statute. So that solves, well, then you have to implement it and make sure there isn't actually cost shifting, which can be a complicated matter. What that doesn't solve is certain sort of overarching competitive concerns. You wouldn't want to have utilities use this as a tool to thwart CCA or other opportunities, things like that. So that isn't resolved by the statute, but the cost shifting, we were successful in having language included that would that strongly protects against cost shifting. So now the utilities have to prove that their proposals comply with those requirements.
They must hate that.
PG&E thinks that we have sufficient information as of right now. That's what they informed us at the hearing conference. So I look forward to seeing more information. Yeah. So moving on to the next topic, there's a decision on energy efficiency in CCA that was just issued. So this is the application process for CCAs for energy efficiency funds for 2015 and beyond. I give this proposed decision a C-. The shining light of this is they provide that CCAs are to be energy efficiency program administrators, just how the investor-owned utilities are administrators. There's this differentiation at the commission between administrators and implementers, and we definitely want to be an administrator. We don't want to be under the investor-owned utilities and for all this for running these programs. So that is excellent. However, we have a couple of challenges. So under this proposed decision, so just keep in mind this is a proposed decision, so we'll be advocating before the commission with the offices and working with them to hopefully get some revisions to these more challenging aspects of the proposed decision before it gets voted out in 30 days. So CCAs are not allowed to receive electricity funds. Or sorry, they're only allowed to receive electricity funds and they're not allowed to receive gas funds. And there's a lot of statements in the proposed decision that says, well, there should be a clear delineation that electricity fund should fund electricity programs, and gas funds should be used to fund gas programs. Well, the problem is the way that energy efficiency works is it's an integrated whole. It's not just that you're going in only to do an electricity improvement. It's the idea of these comprehensive retrofits, the ones that Becky's trying to undertake. And so if you can only get, what the commission is saying is we can run things that seek gas savings on our own dime, but the commission won't pay for it. So that is, in essence, what this means. And so it's very, very limiting for the types of programs that we could run and get funding. Another component is a total resource cost ratio of 1.0 and 1.25. This is a slight change. We're not really concerned about reaching a TRC of 1.0, but the higher the number for TRC, which is this total resource cost, it's a calculation to see whether the energy efficiency activities are cost effective or not. The higher the ratio, the shallower the retrofits have to be. It's sort of like cherry picking and choosing sort of only the best instead of doing the deep dive and really getting into the whole envelope, which is what Becky is talking about. And then the third key issue here is that CCAs wouldn't be able to access statewide or regional funds. So basically it segments out in a huge pot of money, a huge proportion of the funds available through the public purpose program charges, and provides them directly to the investment utilities, and you have an opportunity to apply for those. So I actually want to leave it to maybe Becky and Dawn if they have any additional comments on sort of the overarching.
I appreciate that opportunity. I'll make it brief. The one thing for me that's the most glaring about the proposed decision, it's actually written quite well, and it has some very thoughtful and good things in it. It's just mainly the electricity issue. They're not funding gas measures. And for me, what's really problematic about that is that the CPUC and CEC jointly adopted a long-term energy efficiency strategic plan that sketches out how they would like to see energy efficiency programs go across the state. And the objective is to drive more comprehensive retrofits, to not create things called stranded assets, where you go in and sweep the really cost-effective savings and leave the higher hanging fruit, I guess, for the subsequent measures. That's an issue because if you want to finance a significant retrofit, it's a lot easier for it to make financial sense if you couple the quick payback measures with the longer-term payback measures. So the fact that we're being directed to just focus on the electricity measures unless we can go find our own source of funding for the other measures, and not only that we have a relatively high TRC requirement and that we're supposed to avoid duplication of existing programs, leaves a very small suite of programs that we could potentially pursue. So it's not as though it couldn't work. It's not as though we couldn't make it work. In fact, offering only electricity savings makes it easier to get that high TRC, but it is going to mean that we have to be very selective, very careful, and very focused in the programs we pursue. We won't be able to be as responsive to our community needs, and we won't be able to support the longer-term policy objectives in the state, which are ones that I think really should be the direction that the Commission and all the programs move in.
And I think, when you get back to our mission statement as an agency, it's really to reduce greenhouse gases. This is not solely through electricity. This is overall energy efficiency and energy efficiency and greenhouse gas reductions. And so, this really reaches the core of our mission. And so that's why it's incredibly important that we communicate with the commission offices and their advisors. We'll be providing comments on this. We may be asking board members to come to the commission if folks are available to talk on this matter, because this is something that is going to impact our energy efficiency operations for a very long time. This is sort of the shebang for this, and so we just want to make sure that we can really provide effective programs for folks in our service territory that that really provide great benefits, both on the greenhouse gas reduction front, and being able to serve customers, being able to reach a lot of folks. So just, be aware, and if there's individuals who are particularly interested in participating at the commission on this, we would definitely like to, have board members speak up on this topic. So, do either of you have any more on this? Yes, sir, Mr. Green.
I'm just trying to wake myself up. Not that you're bored or tired to begin with. So I want to put this in a little bit, or if you could help put this in a little better perspective, because energy efficiency, as I understand it, is a substantial chunk of what we do. It's a big service that we provide, and this proposed decision seems to really cut the legs out from under us quite a bit. And so I guess one of my questions is there any statutory or regulatory imperative that this proposed decision goes against or undercuts, that provides a reasonable and maybe viable basis for us to challenge it and argue against it? That's one question I have. And another question I have is, where's this coming from? Because it does, the answer is probably pretty obvious, where all the other adverse stuff comes from, which is the kindly stated or characterized investor-owned utilities. But it just really seems pretty retro. And so, what are your comments about that?
I agree with them, and I think that when you're thinking about the sort of legal and regulatory weaknesses of the proposed decision, mind you, I've had 2 days to digest this, and I have not had the opportunity to talk with, to really brainstorm among the team, but, since this will be voted out before our next board meeting, it's important for me to bring it up to you. Right now, basically the commission is saying that they're not authorized to provide us with gas funds, and we're not allowed to use electricity funds for gas programs. Well, we're already running gas programs with electricity funds, and so
Which they authorized.
So it doesn't make any sense that now at this point in time you're going to segment things out into, okay, only electricity funds can run electricity programs and only gas funds can run gas programs. I think that also when you're looking at it, energy efficiency is sort of a comprehensive whole. It's not broken into electricity and gas in this way. So, I definitely see those as weaknesses, and I think that the fact that it really basically runs directly in opposition to the energy efficiency strategic plan, I think is very serious. So, those are going to be some of the arguments and some of the components that we're going to be discussing, and just seeing what we can do from there. And where did this come from? This is coming out of Commissioner Barron's office, so
Can I address this a little bit?
yeah.
So I've had a little more time to have had some bus rides to read the decision. And essentially what it appears is that the ALJ, the administrative law judge who developed the decision and brought it forward as a proposed decision, had a very strict interpretation of the statutory authority that we have to administer energy efficiency programs as a CCA. As you may recall, we derive our authority from Public Utilities Code, Section 381.1, and it states specifically in that Public Utilities Code that we're allowed to administer programs pursuant to Public Utilities Code Section, I think it's 389.4 or something along those lines, or maybe it's 394. Nonetheless, what it is that all of the language that authorizes the energy efficiency programs for CCA fall under the electrical utility portion of the Public Utilities Code. So there's a separate portion of the Public Utilities Code which deals with gas corporations and public goods funds associated with the gas corporations. And so it appears that the ALJ has taken that as a strict meaning that only electrical funds are authorized, essentially, for CCA use. It's not clear to me how restrictive the statutory language is. As Beth mentioned, we currently are receiving funds to do both gas and electricity measures. If that was an oversight on the Commission's part initially, that's a possibility. If there's flexibility to advocate for changes in that interpretation is what we get to investigate over the next week or so.
And just adding to that, just, you know, what the statutes sort of point to is the public goods charge, which actually doesn't actually exist anymore, and there's a different non-bypassable charge that funds these energy efficiency programs. And so I think that there could be a little bit of a disconnect there between, you know, the ALJ reading the statute and looking at what sort of was historically there versus what is actually in operation right now. So those are the types of things that we're going to be analyzing and looking through as we're developing comments, as, you know, we talk to commissioners and, you know, talk to other parties and see what we can do.
I would just add that I think that this is indicative of other issues that we see at the CPUC, and I think lately we have seen that, you know, we're really up against other interests that have a lot of resources and are at the Commission a lot. And so it takes a lot for our small agency to use a very loud voice to make any significant change. And then when we turn around and go back to our business for a couple of weeks, then a lot of that unravels and gets undone. And it's difficult because we are one agency serving a very small customer base, and there are a lot of decisions that get made without thinking about the impact on our small numbers. You know, having other CCAs up and running is going to make our voice louder, and we're hopeful that that will have an impact. But I think some of our newness has worn off a bit, and when we were new and we were facing a lot of unfairness and we kind of showed the truth and the facts, attention was paid to that, and we were able to have some leverage at strategic times when it was really needed. I think that the more that we need to do that, the less response that we get. And so we're having to continue to work very hard to make our voice heard and find allies and partners where we can. But I think this is an issue where we need to continue to be very, very active and very vocal to make sure that our issues are really seen, because if we're not there, they aren't seen, and the steamroller just keeps going the way it was going before.
Yeah, that's just really, really challenging. And it's just, I mean, basically unfair and discouraging to be able to be sufficiently effective that you accomplish a milestone. But if you're not there day in, day out, defending the fort, all the average guys are chipping away at it. And if you have some home emergency for 2 or 4 weeks and you come back, you can be in a lot of trouble. And it's just a really tough adversarial circumstance.
And I think that just, not to really put a damper on things, but when we're fighting the fight at the Commission for community choice aggregation, really we're fighting for choices that communities in the future are going to want to make. And when decisions are made at Public Utilities Commission, it's very hard to subsequently change those decisions. It's, you know, and we've seen that in a lot of our activities at the Public Utilities Commission. We're walking into basically a market that's structured for direct access, which is very different from CCA, trying to get the regulatory changes to sort of acknowledge what the benefits of CCA brings, you know, but we are realistically, we're fighting this fight for future community choice aggregators, and so I think that, you know, the weight is on us and the burden is on us to try to make a path forward so that, you know, these types of opportunities to run energy efficiency programs are available to other communities that really want to make a difference in greenhouse gases and renewables and energy efficiency in their own communities. So, you know, it'll be really helpful once there are additional CCAs up and running and can sort of fight this fight as well. And we have moved out to the ones that are close. So, you know, we hope to have a lot of voices on this, but you know, it is going to be an helpful help.
I will say though that in the meantime, we really are looking to you guys for strategic direction on how we can be of assistance, because I think we have seen that, you know, to the extent we have board members along with staff meeting with the commissioners at strategic times, that really helps. For the lawyers in the room, you can actually meet ex parte with the decision maker, which is great. You can't do that in court.
You can lobby.
Yeah, so let's do it. You know, I mean, basically, I think we recognize the situation we're in. I think you've adequately or accurately summarized it, but let's at least do what we can do, pick our battles strategically. I was joking with Beth. I want, anytime she comes near the PUC, I want everyone to think cost shift without her even having to say it.
Can I just say one thing?
Yeah.
I mean, it's incredibly user unfriendly for the customers too, to have to go through two different processes. So what you're going to see is it's going to erode the level of energy efficiency projects that happen within a CCA. So, you know, it's very consumer unfriendly, and maybe the Division of Ratepayer Advocates can help us. But I mean, I think we might be able to develop actual empirical data maybe to show what we're doing, what our success or what the costs per kilowatt that we're saving, you know, as a means of throwing some data back at them. So, yeah, I think it's a pretty important battle.
Yeah, so plug us in.
Yep, absolutely. So moving on to the last item.
Before you do, I just have one more question.
Yes.
On the preceding one. So you're talking about how we've acted in reliance on pre-existing PUC rules and regulations that authorize the energy efficiency programs that we have. Are we just like, you know, subjects of the king, and because the direction has changed and the whim has changed that now we have to comply? Is there no sort of rules of like detrimental reliance or estoppel or something like that where we can say, listen, we've relied on what you told us the rules have been, and now all of a sudden they're not, and that's just leaving us really exposed. Is there any option like that?
I would say probably not, insofar as, you know, our current energy efficiency programs are authorized through 2014, and we need to reapply.
I see. So we're time
they're
shrunk.
changing the, you know, they're sort of changing the rules of the game for this future period.
Got it.
But that doesn't mean there aren't going to be other legal arguments, and this is definitely, you know, when you're picking your battles, this is a big one.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
So my last item is actually sort of another one where we have some conflation between, or integration between what's happening at the Public Utilities Commission and what's happening on the legislative front. And this is just to give you a heads up of things that are going to be coming down the pipeline. So there is a new residential rate design rulemaking at the commission. We've been participating in it really only insofar as, you know, make sure that rates are fair to folks, and also make sure that at some point they need to break out these overall. Actually, let me start from non-regulatory speak. Right now, residential rates are broken into 4 tiers. And the way that the legislation has worked to date is that the first and second tiers of those rates are capped. That's why they're a lot lower than tiers 3 and 4. And this is really tied in also with the Californians for Alternative, California Alternative Rates for Energy Care, which is the low-income program as well. All of these are tied together in various sort of, the CARE program is a subsidy that's provided by other ratepayers to make sure that folks who need help with their bills get help. Well, the way that the legislation was put in place was actually as a result of the energy crisis, and it pegged these tier 1 and tier 2 rates very low. And so what's happened is there's been more of an extreme change in sort of tiers 3 and 4 subsidizing the lower usage customers, and it's gotten pretty out of whack. And so folks have been talking about revamping residential rate design for a while. So in June of 2012, there was a new rulemaking that came out specifically to address, what should rate design look like in the future, and it needed a legislative fix, but it was sort of beginning the conversation at the Public Utilities Commission. So that's been sort of going down the path. We have been involved there. Mostly our requests have related to, in all of these proposals for rate design that everybody's putting forward, can you please break it out into generation and T&D so that you can see what's fair on the generation side of the rate, and that is what is very important to us. On this parallel track at the legislature has been AB 327. We weren't very engaged on this just because this is sort of an overall structure and we had different fights to fight, especially with green option and other items. But the idea under AB 327 is that it would get rid of these caps on tier 1 and tier 2. There would be a transition period. There would be a simplification of the rate structure, possibly to 2-tiered rates, could be more. A significant change is that it would let the CPUC set a fixed charge on the distribution rate to sort of cover fixed costs. So everybody would see, a $10 per month charge on their bill, rather than sort of the variable cost of variable distribution costs. There would be some significant reforms to how the CARE discount is calculated. And there's going to be significant changes to net energy metering, which, if you're thinking about how the tier structure works, it's going to have a significant impact on net energy metering as well. So right now, the way net energy metering works is if you have solar panels on your roof, that it sort of subtracts out all of the electricity used in your home, and so you're not actually paying for distribution charges or generation charges, even though you are at certain points, consuming, distribution grid services and generation services. So it's going to be negative impact on net energy metering customers, but also the current subsidy has been projected to be, if we kept on the same path for net energy metering, that the annual subsidy would be $1 billion subsidy by non-net energy metering customers to subsidize net energy metering customers. So it's a big subsidy, it's a lot of money, so there's going to be significant reforms to net energy metering. And there's a new provision that the investor utilities are allowed to come up with what they call a distributed resources plan, which means that they can come up with distributed generation, energy efficiency, energy storage, electric vehicles, and demand response as part of their sort of distribution grid services. So this gets to cost shifting. So I'll be bringing that up with the commission. But anyways, this is going to really have a significant impact on our customers over time as these rates develop. So it's going to have an impact on our own rate design, depending on how things hash out on our own net energy metering tariff. We're sort of at the whim of what the overall rate context is. So if there's substantial changes to net energy metering on the PG&E side, we have to be cognizant of that on the MEA side. So we'll just be following this closely and obviously involved in a lot of the cost shifting issues and also the fairness issues to make sure that that generation costs are accurately reflected in rates. So that's sort of preliminary and more to come, but it's just sort of the preview of what's going to be happening, frankly, over the next couple of years. Any questions on that? No?
Thank you.
Thanks, Bill.
Yeah, great. Okay, item 9, board member and staff matters for the good of the order. Seeing none, we're adjourned.